So this started out as a bit of a joke, to be honest. I was just messing around with this little sound. But when it started to take shape was when I found this kind of fat 80s style beat. Then I thought, okay, we might have something here. So I'm going to break this down bit by bit to show you how I did it. So first, let's start with those synths. This initial idea came from a synthesizer that comes with Ableton Live. It's called Analog. This is a preset that I created, a saw wave, and it's had a few different things added to it, a bit of EQ, chorus, delay. And that basically was the beginning. So I fleshed this out across a song. It started out with that simple line, and then I built upon that to create the chorus, which is a little bit fuller. It's got that extra little bit. I also came up with a pre-chorus sort of thing. Slightly different. So that kind of formed the basic structure. We had a verse, pre-chorus, and a chorus. On to the drums. So the drums are actually a stock loop that comes with Ableton Live. I just kind of cropped it down a little bit so that it doesn't have this sort of annoying fill at the end. So what we have is this. Nice punchy fat sound. And to that, I added, what did I add? Literally just a bit of compression to that. So that was the drums pretty much done. However, to keep things interesting, I did decide to add a little bit of something in the second verse. Programmed this little Roland C78 kind of thing. Sort of a 70s drum machine kind of vibe. And then when you add that with the other beat, it sounds quite interesting. In terms of audio effects for these drums, again, not very much. I literally just programmed it in, put a little bit of compression on there, but that's it. Then we move on to the bass. Bring it up to my feet. I can see where they go. Now this, again, is an Ableton analog synth. I just created this by adding a bit of a low pass filter to give it a sort of slightly more warm kind of earthy sound. Really, that's about it. It's a saw wave. This is what it sounds like. I always try and get my bass lines to sound slightly different, but work with the melody, but kind of work around it. So it's not just playing the standard kind of root notes the whole time. It's got a little bit of a bounce to it, something I quite like to do in my productions. This just plays all the way through, except for the pre-chorus where it changes ever so slightly. You got this. Hear it with the rest of it. And on top of that sound, I just put a little bit of compression on there, a bit of EQ, standard sort of stuff. And so finally, the last big piece of this puzzle was the vocals. Now, I always find vocals to be one of the hardest parts of recording or producing a track. To me, it's like really important to get that right, and it's really difficult, I think, to get it how I want it to sound in my head. So actually, that can take the longest amount of time, almost definitely takes the longest amount of time. For this one, I doubled up the vocals, 2 different channels of me recording my voice on the verse and then 4 for the chorus. So it just kind of builds up that sound, makes the vocals sound a bit fatter. Bring it up to my feet, I can see where they go. Bring it out, I don't wanna know. Actually, that's had quite a lot of effects put on it. Aside from just layering 2 different vocals, I've added a bunch of reverb, a bunch of compression, delay, and what I've recently discovered is the effect chorus, which gives it a nice little, just widens it slightly, makes it sound a little bit fatter in the mix. And then for the pre-chorus, it's quite similar. although I actually moved this onto separate channels so I could mix them individually from verse vocals. It sounds quite similar. So calculated, but you fool me every time. So underrated, but I'll call you when it's time. I like having them on separate channels because it means that you can mix them individually. Initially, at one point, I thought that the verse needed to be a little bit louder than the pre-chorus and the chorus, so it just made it a little bit easier for me to be able to tweak things. And then finally, we have the chorus itself, and for this one, I actually layered 4 different vocal tracks, so you get this quite a much wider sound, which I think you want for a chorus. And actually, I forgot to mention that there's a bit of delay on that as well. You can just hear it kind of in the background. It just gives it a little bit more space, makes it sound a little bit different from the rest of the track, which is kind of nice. So after you've got all that, it's just a matter of mixing everything down. So at this point, I had 3 different sections of the track. This verse bit. Bring it up to my feet. I can see where they go. Bring it up, I don't wanna know. Pre-chorus. So calculated, but you bore me every time. And then you finally have this nice big chorus. So all that's left after that is to mix it down and get it sounding tight. And that is easier said than done. But I try and do this kind of along the way as much as possible. But ultimately, if you have a certain idea of how you want it to sound in your head, you're going to spend a lot of time just tweaking the different channels, adding different effects, and that can take a long time. So what I like to do is listen to it a lot, but also take breaks as much as possible, because I think there's something to be said in having a fresh pair of ears, so to speak. So, you could be spending hours working on something, but ultimately your brain's going to stop working properly. So, I go away, have a cup of tea, come back, and I can often make much better mixing decisions after that. Another thing that I like to do is when I'm listening back to the track, to sort of turn around in my chair, not look at the screen, and try not to look at where the levels are, and just think in my head, right, what is it that's missing? Is something too loud? Is something too quiet? Whatever. And I find that definitely does help. I know the track's done when I turn around and I listen to it and I think, no, that sounds good to me. Like, nothing's kind of standing out very obviously. So at that point, it's pretty much done. I will get it mastered. I use Lander, which is an automated mastering software. It's probably not the best, but they do a pretty good job for the price. And after that, it's just a matter of uploading it, and that's it really. So I hope that kind of sheds some light on how I go about writing a tune. I thought I'd just share it with you guys because it is what I do, especially right now that we're all stuck in this lockdown. Hope that was mildly entertaining.